everyone. This is Leilani Cawthon, CEO of Learning Council News Media and Research. And I'm welcoming you to our 10th Annual Digital Transition Survey Results and Awards, the Learning Leadership Institute. This is going to be a really fast briefing for the first hour. So please be ready to type in any questions or anything you want to put into chat. We'll be watching it so that we answer you in a timely manner, hopefully. And let's get started. So the first thing I want to tell you about the Learning Leadership Institute is it's a national event. So we're going to be seeing people on here from all over the country. And I'll give you a little bit of the agenda. So first hour is our briefing. So you'll hear a lot from me. And then from 11 to 11:30, we're hosting Miss Stacy Buckaloo from Cobb County, Megan Stanfield from Cobb County, and Diane Tidwell from Tomball ISD. And then 11:30 to 12, we'll be hosting Dr. Andre Townsell, Dr. Jeremy Owo, and Dr. Mark Benini, as well as Barb Hafner, longtime friends of mine, very proud of that district. And then we will be doing 3 different panels from the vendor sector. So you hear what's new going on in classroom tech, new in innovations, new in digital curriculum and systems. And then we'll finish off the day with a panel related to what we see happening in the future. All right, so let me tell you who our winners were for the year. This is the winner stack for the gainers. There's gainers, achievers, innovators, sustainers, distinctive excellence level, and then expo meritorious. The gainers this year were Howard County Public Schools, Maryland, Montgomery County Public Schools, Maryland, Calvert County, also in Maryland. Maryland seemed to win a lot this year. Tomball ISD, North Little Rock, Fauquier County Public Schools, Virginia, Osborne School District number 8, Arizona, Florence Unified School District, Arizona, Park City School District in Utah, Tigard Tualatin in Oregon, Briarcliff Manor School District in New York, Blind Fork Rye Union Free School District in New York, Cajon Valley Union School District, California, who's hosting us this spring for an event, East Baton Rouge Parish School System in Louisiana, Haines City High School, Polk County Public Schools, Florida, the Rare Earth Continuation High School in California, Mountain Shadows Elementary School, Deer Valley Unified School District, Arizona, and District 7 Elementary, Cumberland County, North Carolina. For the other levels, at the achievers level, we have Prince George's County Public Schools, Maryland, Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools, Kansas, Belton School District, number 124, Missouri, Jacksonville North Pulaski School District, Arkansas, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools in Georgia, Jasper County School District in South Carolina, and then a school called the Key to Learning with Dr. Nyman in Florida. At the innovators level, we have Spring Branch ISD, San Antonio ISD, Katy ISD, and Dallas ISD in Texas, Brewster Central School District in New York, and Metro Nashville Public Schools in Tennessee. At the sustainers level, we have Cobb County School District in Georgia, Delphian School, Oregon, Meriden Public in Connecticut, who will be with us today, and then Next Generation Academics in Florida. And at the distinctive excellence level, we have St. Vrain Valley Schools in Colorado. So a lot of winners, a lot of work went into choosing them this year out of the thousands that responded to the survey. So let me get into the data from our 2023 national survey. First, I'll give you the big picture so you understand kind of what's going on in the country. First of all, AI is here. So this is really a big deal. You go to any of the big conferences and it's about all anybody really wants to talk about. That includes recommendations engine AI, which may be embedded in curriculum courseware. It includes embedded AI, which is Internet of Things AI, like if you walk into any building, the network knows your phone is there. Refrigerators can talk to networks, that kind of thing. Generative AI, which is getting the most acclaim right now, that is the type of thing that's word-based and can generate reports for you and lessons and everything else. And then there's spatial temporal AI, which is new to the education market. It's a dynamic learner intersection with teaching, integral to the new form of schooling that we call hybrid logistics. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that today. So if you think about spatial temporal, it's the kind of thing that Uber or Lyft use to geolocate the driver and the rider and put them together. It's the kind of thing used in shipping logistics. It's now coming into the education sector. So the big four, in terms of what we can tell you about is happening in the market, is number one is attrition. This is a real big concern for a lot of superintendents that we talk to. 4,428 schools in the country have reached or exceeded a 20% decline in enrollment. Almost all of those, although there's some rural and medium-sized districts that are experiencing it, almost all of them are in the big cities. So the cities are really struggling with loss of students. And most of that is going to homeschooling, although there's a good chunk of it that is in charters. So the homeschooling movement is experiencing a 51 to 65% growth year over year since 2020. And it's just really off the charts. It's something that we've been inspecting a lot. Like, why is this happening? What is going on? And then the teacher shortage is a really big deal. The schools are short over 1 million teachers. 86% of public schools struggle to hire educators. Then there's the absenteeism problem, with 25% of students chronically absent in the 2021 or 21-22 school year, a 91% increase. Now, I just saw another report this morning that that's continuing unabated. So if we look at the shifting school landscape, the largest growth category, again, is the homeschooling category. There's also a category called the off-grid, which is 4%, which went down in 2023, mostly because a lot of the off-grid were populations of immigrants, and they ended up getting enrolled into public schools in the last year. So that went down and caused traditional public to increase just slightly, but not necessarily in regular traditional public, but mostly in charters. So the charters had a huge growth. The total homeschool and off-grid, which means they're just not reporting it anywhere, is about 16%. So it's a huge amount of students. And then, like I said, traditional schools lost another 1% going into 2023. Now that number, those numbers, 69.5 million, is off of the Census Bureau numbers, not the numbers of enrolled that are reported to NCES or the federal DOE. So it's a larger total number that we look at in terms of how many students there actually are. So we look at districts that with schools that lost at least 20% decline. You can see in this map where that is. And a lot of it is like shocking to people. If you look at the numbers in detail, some of the remote areas where students would have to go really great distances to get to a school, the actual absenteeism or decline in enrollment is huge. It could be as high as 75% in some of these places or higher. All right, so let's talk about that off-grid student. So, there's a number of states that don't require reporting, and they're listed here on this slide. There's 11 of them. So that means you really can't get a grip on how many kids are just off-grid. So there was a lot of guesstimating based on some reports that we see from the charter schools, some of the homeschooling movements, as to what they're saying they have, and then against the immigration reports. So the number of states with low regulation are also listed there because, there's a lot of, we don't know where those kids are. And then the U.S. online unstructured on-demand learning with teacher intersection, those are a lot of the times they're companies that provide for, a full schooling experience. It's just completely online. It may or may not be intersected that much with teachers, but there's some oversight. That market is expected to grow very, very significantly. So it's a threat to traditional public schooling that's still organized and may or may not be public. It could be private. All right, so let's talk about school choice. So, and I'm watching if you guys have any questions. School choice is a big, big movement, and it's really not estimated very well out there. So Learning Council dug into it from a research perspective. What does this really mean? We have, 19 total states right now with school choice and vouchers. There's a varying degree of how much vouchers are allowed, and some limitations are on some of them. But we're expecting 11 more states to join by the end of 2025, possibly all in 2024. What that really means is that there's an estimated right now between 23 and 114 billion in available voucher money. So we're expecting massive investment to come in, and some things that maybe aren't expected in terms of just, states doing more online schools at the state level for homeschoolers. We're expecting some big moves coming from the private sector. By the end of this year, even into 2025, we could see as much as 300 billion in play. That's, since the market's about 750 billion total spend, we're looking at 51% of the United States population of students will be living in choice states. So we also expect for some of the states that have said they will never do choice to start looking at it more seriously, because quite frankly, if you're spending over 20,000, maybe 30,000 a student, like New York, if you could get away with a voucher that would only be like, 7,500, 6,500 in some states or less per student, the size of the savings would be in the multi-billions. So we think that there's going to be some play by some of the states we're not expecting to say suddenly, hey, let's have choice in our state too, just because of the financial savings. Okay, so finding staff, another really big issue for schools. We hear this everywhere. 86% of public schools are struggling to hire. We don't expect that to go away until at least 2030. 45% are reporting understaffed, and the average school has a quarter of their positions unfilled. So if you really look at the structure of the way schools are trying to put a teacher in every classroom, it's kind of unsustainable. And a lot of cuts. How are we going to do this? We can't get a science teacher. Maybe we could share with the neighboring schools or districts to do maybe virtual classes online, that kind of thing. And there are states, I know we've talked to Colorado about this, where St. Vrain has been adopting small districts around them and doing some of that sharing. So you're going to start to see a more network mesh sort of answer to how you're going to fill positions. All right, so school consolidation is a big trend in the United States, and there's a lot of closings. They're very contentious in almost every neighborhood that tries to attempt them. There were 755 schools closures, 571. Yeah. 571 regular schools, 71 special education. Anyway, so there's about 167,000 students that have been displaced already. There are approximately another 1,000 schools closed, 2022, 23. In 2024, there will be at least 70,000 childcare programs closed because the money's gone away. That's going to drive more homeschooling, because most of the homeschooling starts in the youngest grades, K-5. And even China is reporting on this. I don't know if they're gloating or what's happening, but it's a really big deal in terms of the structure of education that's going to work for Americans. Because if you're having to go farther to school every day, you're more likely to say, wait a second, maybe this would work with creating a parent pod, parents over development locally, and rather than do it this way. So there's a lot of pressure right now in the market. What's happening globally with personalized learning is really shocking. The Verified Market reports that by 2025, the global personalized learning market will be about 21.2 billion. By 2024, the global personalized learning market is estimated by another institution to be 128 billion. So there's kind of disparity there. But what's important to note is that 63% of internet users have engaged in online learning because of its flexibility already. So the familiarity with the form, the structure of using the internet to find and engage yourself in learning has really embedded itself in society, and this is having an effect on schools. So also online learning is a lot quicker than traditional learning, which is also having an effect on schools in a different way. And I'm going to talk more about the alpha generation. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions. Let me check my questions there. Okay, if you guys want to type in questions, feel free to do that. All right. So another thing to mention is that the consumer spend right now in the United States alone is about 37.7 billion, it's up by 15% in 2023. In 2024, we're expecting it to slow down a little bit. It slowed down considerably in schools. So they're spending about $11 billion less. This is all schools put together, public and private, than the consumer spend is. So that's, again, the familiarity with online learning, and typically high value online learning. Like it's animated, it's courseware, it's maybe it's a YouTube video, but it's definitely money being spent on apps and subscription sites by the American consumer. All right, so let's talk about what our survey says. This was the 2023 surveys. There was two of them. One was administrator focused. The other one was teacher focused. We had over 1 million survey sends, 4,912 responders. The award selections were from 130 full completions. We didn't really look at the partials for the assignment of awards. And 175 teacher accepted completions. We're not going to be doing the awards for the teachers today. We're doing that privately just with them. All right, so the K12 EdTech spend predicted going into 2024, going into 2024, in 23 it was up by 400 million. Smaller than we were expecting. But going into 2024, we're looking at only 1%, if not less than 1% increase. What you have to remember, though, is that 2022 was such a significant jump in spend. It was 6.7 billion over the previous year, and it's maintaining that, which is really significant. So even if it declines a little bit in 2024, it still was the biggest jump on record. So all the vendors should be really happy. This includes all the hardware, all digital curriculum, any staffing, paper and print curriculum, that kind of thing. It doesn't include the paper and print. All right, so traditional versus progressive. We asked this question because we want to know kind of the way the schools feel about themselves, right? You will find schools in the country that are very resistant to technology. They tend to be the wealthier ones who have parents who insist that because that's the way they learn, they want their kids to have the same learning as they had, and they're a little insistent on it. But 58% of schools now consider themselves progressive, which is student-centered with active learning experience projects, collaborating with a teacher as facilitator, more flexible time structures, more inquiry and critical thinking, versus the teacher-centered rote learning routines and memorization. So this is a really significant data point for us because it tells us the market is feeling the shift and trying to accommodate the change of this century. So we also ask, which strategy elements are you engaged in? Because when we look at a lot of school and district strategies, they're very goal-oriented or purpose-oriented. They don't necessarily break down into all the detailed plans that we would expect from a corporate strategy, perhaps, into each individual thing that would be looked at as you're looking at a full transformation of your institution. So we looked at this, and of course, curriculum is a huge one, culture is a huge one, implementation supports is huge, not as much space and time use as we would like to see. Redefining teacher roles is a big deal. Overall form is not anywhere near what we would like to see because the overall form of a traditional school is still sort of manufacturing line oriented. All right, so we also ask, what parts of a strategy are you including? Again, expecting that they would break down into plans, programs, projects, daily action plans, those kinds of things. And they really center mostly at the top: purpose statement, goal statement, and then maybe plans, maybe programs enumerated under plans, maybe outcome statements. But when you get down into directives, sub-enumerated under projects, so that you could really run your organization from the viewpoint of reporting statistics back in, that doesn't really occur in a lot of schools. And I think you're going to see that have to shift, especially with the teacher shortage and, using a lot more high value digital curriculum. You're going to see a lot more focus on what are our data points? How do we analyze this? How do we know? Because we're tracking every single program. All right. So we asked also, and this is an interesting one, what is the common consideration of generative AI use in your institution, such as ChatGPT? And it was kind of even between administrators and teachers. 34% teachers and administrators may use, nobody really cares. And then 30 to 32% no policy. So we're expecting a big policy shift in 2024 because there's a lot of opinions on this. Teachers think more than administrators that it should all be blocked. 11% think that they can use it under certain circumstances, and a very small think they can use it at will. So you're going to start to see a lot of formation of policy around this kind of thing. So Anne Flynn just asked a question, which is there a difference in data around student attrition numbers from progressive or traditional models? Yes, and the majority is from traditional school models. I don't have the specific data. I have to go look back with my analysts at the specifics of that between the top line data I just shared with you, which is here, and which schools were responding and, sort of what they were also saying in terms of where it's at. But to my memory, yes, mostly traditional are losing. All right, so let's talk about technologies and the intention to purchase. So number one, both by administrators and teachers, is interactive whiteboards or tables. So that's a really good sign, because if you're going to attract and retain students, you have to do something that maybe a parent isn't going to do at home, which is buy an interactive whiteboard or interactive table. You also have to do things that make them say, well, I could do this with other kids, like esports is a really big deal. You have to offer things that are going to be supportive social emotionally. And then, of course, networking technology is a really big deal, because you have to have devices everywhere now. Virtual reality, much bigger for administrators than teachers, which is interesting to us. Motion tracking video camera is very interesting to administrators, not so much teachers. Robotics is a big one. Learning management systems, much bigger for administrators than teachers. And I should tell you why. I think when we look at what teachers are saying with all their different responses, they prefer to have all the control of all the different pieces at their level, and we're predicting that's going to have to change. It's going to have to be far more centralized. They're going to have to use learning management systems and or courseware and courses that are already pre-built and well crafted by the vendor market. And then, as you can see that difference between what teachers say is they use discrete digital curriculum, meaning single things or single apps, scrap of old textbook scanned in, typed instructions, single photos, single short videos, way more than administrators answer. So you have a problem there in terms of being able to manage your operations over time. If you lose that teacher and you try to slide another one into that same spot, they're not going to understand all of the filing parameters of the earlier teacher and what was used for which lesson. And then live tutoring systems, big interest in that. Artificial intelligence, much higher interest by administrators than by teachers. Intelligent calendaring, big interest by administrators, not so much teachers. Drones, and then professional grade CTE. So we also asked which trends are influencing your policies or purchases. Number one was building security. So you have a big problem with, making sure that some nefarious agent is going to creep into your building and hurt anyone. That's a really big deal for a lot of schools, particularly in inner city schools. And then, of course, programs to develop more certified teachers. And then recruitment and retention, expanded social emotional, expanded CT. I'm going down the administrator side, but you can see the teachers were responding differently than what administrators were saying. So the disparity there is part of what we like to point out, is the disparity between what the administration might want to do and desires to have accomplished, but isn't necessarily in alignment with what teachers want. There's a leadership issue there in terms of like making sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, so we also asked, what are your highest pressures? Administrators reporting recruiting teachers. And then I'm going to remove this bar so you can see it. Losing students to alternatives, higher numbers of IEPs. And then on the teacher side, of course, social emotional wellness, recruiting teachers, recruiting other staff. They really can see pressure here. I think one of the most interesting points is the 41% of administrators saying higher number of IEPs. Those are individual education plans. And what that tells you is they've got a huge disparity in terms of what people are expecting or what an individual student needs and what they're trying to do on their sort of normalized path of courses and classes and the manufacturing line structure of whole grouping everybody together. The desire and the actual fact of the structure of how students are today is demanding that they have higher numbers of IEPs. So that's pointing to this reach for personalized learning and trying to do personalized well has a lot of hindrances when you're when still maintaining the whole group orientation. All right. The mindset of, and we'll go back to this, and if you're still on, you'll like this one. 41% of administrators have a mindset to affect some transformation to move away from the traditional school model. That's higher than we've seen in previous years. And what that's saying is that they know that the structure that they've been in for the last 250 years is not really working. That's a good thing, because they'll start exploring new ways to have models and the form of their organization. So we also asked about emergencies. It's the first time we've asked this. And what came up at the top was parents questioning or complaining about curriculum. There's a very active audience of parents out there who are very interested in exactly what they're being taught. That just skyrocketed during the pandemic because they were at home seeing what was happening online with their children, and now they want to know everything. This is a very different arena now for schools to be in, because maybe they don't have it all codified and easily available for a parent to see. And so there's an appearance of some secrecy to it when maybe there really isn't some secrecy, but it's just the way the filing's done, the way the systems are contrived, and that kind of thing. Also, a lot of medical and police intervention and having to lock down a school and having to call medical help for staff or some other emergency. This is also a huge amount of pressure on schools. All right. So then we asked this question, and which definition of teacher do you apply? And you'll notice there's a huge disparity between what is really the traditional model, which is conducting a formal exchange, really lecturing, between what administrators think is the definition and what teachers think. So teachers have shifted more than people usually recognize, and they're more in agreement with the facilitator role or being a guide. So if you notice that the bottom one, being a guide plus the facilitator one, is over 50% on the teacher side. That's what they're thinking their role really is more than anything else. Whereas administrators don't see it that same way. So there's a leadership issue here in terms of what is a teacher right now alongside technology, or how technology exactly is being used. Class management seems to be the same, keeping everybody on pace between administrators and teachers. All right, so where teachers spend the most time, number one is on class management and discipline. Now, this is something that intellectually we've really focused in on. We're like, why are we doing it that way? Why are we making it so that the teacher's role is not just teaching, it's disciplining a whole group and managing the whole group to remain a whole group and focusing on whole groupness in everything and grading on a curve and all that other kind of stuff. It's sort of doesn't really fit with this century, when you might have somebody else be doing that. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more later, but and then of course the second one is teaching the whole group. So there's a mindset here that is really important to point out. The whole group orientation is itself a constricting force for what a teacher gets to do to actually dig into maybe personalizing learning or manage those IEPs. And then there's a lot of work on procedural tasks. So the top three, if you pull them together, are really part of the function and structure of what teaching has always been. And it turns out to be where they spend their most time, which may be not what a school really wants to have happening. So this is good to inspect this particular side. And then we ask them, what is your most valued teacher duty? And you'll notice there's a disparity between what administrators think is the most valued and what teachers think. But what's really curious is that it's district policy compliance at the very top, which is not teaching, it's compliance. And then, of course, data analysis, a big deal, lesson planning, state assessment administration, all the way down to, at the very bottom, content or subject expertise, which is what you would normally think a teacher really is the expert on that one particular subject. So this is an interesting one to actually analyze as well, because maybe the structure, maybe the form of the organization and the way it's being executed and delivered is a hindrance to what would be the best elevation of a teacher's capabilities. All right, so which definition of a student's role is the first time we've asked this question. This was an interesting response we got. A person expected to attend, complete milestones, and participate in a whole group seemed to be almost equal between administrators and teachers. And that a person there to learn, acquire knowledge. And then the third one down was a person who investigates framed areas of inquiry or examines presented knowledge and crafts a logical interpretation. What is interesting to me is that there's no, it didn't have a higher number anywhere, right? So those top three could be sort of pulled together. I think what we're saying with this is that what you expect from a student today needs to be understood by the student, and there needs to be some leadership in that as to what you want them to do, not just from a lesson to lesson and grade and class perspective, but overall, what is my role? What am I here for? Needs to be clear to them and clear to the organization. So where do they expect to spend more money? Number one was new staff, which they're not going to get. And if they're just going to keep increasing staff pay, it should be pointed out that between 1950 and the present date, staff has gone to a 1-to-7 ratio. That's all adults against the single student. 7 adults for every 1 student is a 262% increase over 1950. So additional more and more staff means the education sector, with both pay and numbers of staff, is the most direct in terms of how many people they're applying to every one of their recipients of any market right now. It's way past the medical industry. So that one I'm really questioning, like, why would you go that direction when you might be able to shift the way you do things? And then, of course, this is a problem we weren't anticipating, but we put it in the question. Sourcing food, fuel, energy, and other subscription or routine services becomes a real problem for administrators. There's a lot of people that work on this, just 100%. Insurances they're working on, digital curriculum resources, pay and benefit, capital expenditures. You can see the list. All right, so we ask ourselves, what do we predict this next year to do in 2024? We're thinking it'll be 0.7, could be lower than that, could be flat, but we're expecting it to maintain its enormous increase of 2022. We think the biggest winners are going to be digital curriculum, particularly highly crafted courseware. It should win big because it is going to save teachers a huge amount of time. People are starting to be more and more familiar with it. Also, tutoring and distance teaching, a big deal. Social emotional systems, esports. But number 2, consulting and PhD, and professional development. We expect that area to have a lot of spending this year because there is a need to transition the structure, but people don't really know how. And so they're going to be looking at that. So let's talk a little bit about the future. We have just under a half an hour left about this. And this is, I think, going to be interesting to everybody. It's, when we look at the future, we know that the data, everything I just showed you and a whole lot more, is really pointing to AI driving a new schooling form. Now, that's different than a model. A form is not a model. A model is something that you put over the existing form. And a model is something like, blended learning, flipped learning. You're definitely still having a building with a teacher in every classroom. People are moving from one classroom to the next classroom unless they're primary age. And you're trying to customize within the very tight constraints of how you've always done things. If you put AI over the top of that old structure, you still can use it within that context, but it's kind of constrained for what it could be doing. So the reason we think that is because the biggest underlying issue that schools are not really recognizing is the difference between this current generation, which is in school right now in K-12, and earlier generations is, and that's the alpha generation, is that they're tech raised. They're also aware of the unlimitedness of the internet. They're expecting customized experiences from every sector. They prefer the screen to the human interface. Let me just put that in perspective for you. They come to a place where they're supposed to sit forward and listen to words coming out of a human's mouth. This is alien transactional knowledge happening for them. where normally they're in their screen. You can see this in every restaurant in America if you watch a family until they take the students or their young child's iPad or iPhone away. This is just the facts of this generation. They don't want to talk to mom on the phone. They would rather text. They're declining these physical sports and after school engagements unless it's esports. So it's fairly interesting to look at the fact that the internet is where they live, and anything that isn't purveyed to them via that interface is almost like alien ground for them. One of the things we also observe is that this generation is the least likely to have attended church than previous generations. And in church, you learn, you have to sit still and listen to the minister. And we have whole populations of students, a great deal of them that have never had that experience when they arrive in a public school. So when they arrive there, it's like I said, it's alien ground. So part of the context that I'm trying to give you right now is that you have to look at where they're at in order to communicate to them and get them to learn. And that might mean that you have to shift what you're using in terms of your communication pattern. Okay, so we also look at the levels of learning innovation in America. The topmost level is, like I've been saying, the form that you have purveyed. Now, forms have most recently for the last 20, 25 years, 30 years, been either a fully traditional patterned manufacturing line school, or they've been fully online with very little, if any, teacher intersection. There might even be just chatbots. But those two forms were the main ones. Then you came up with charters, and there's been some, modifications to form slightly by adding some flex time so that you could put your electives and your remedial into flex time. But definitely form is the upper level of how you would innovate, how you would transform. And then the next level down that is the model and the logistics. So logistics has been the most ignored in terms of how you would change a school, because logistics in the typical traditional pattern are very linear. They're very direct. You assign by grade because of your age, you assign into a class with a course, and then the motion is very linear. It's not dynamic. Okay, so there's a question. Hi, Anne. Should we take you off of mute? And Doug, can you find Anne Flynn and let her ask the question out loud? Anne, we're going to take you off mute. Let me see, where's Anne? Of course, these things are not alphabetical, so I have to find you and make you off mute. There you are. Anne, you're off mute. You want to ask your question?
Love your presentation, and I'm hearing it both in my own community as well as writ large and other coverage about the pressure that some parents are placing on schools, as well as some legislative bodies saying, whoa, 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 too much screen time. We need to pull away from screen time. So I'm concerned about the position that puts school leaders in who are trying to move that direction. Just any strategies you've run across to help mitigate that. And yes, I know all screen time is not the same.
Well, yeah, and I think it really has to do with, and I was going to get into this later, but I'll say it now. It really has to do with the fact that what's not being recognized is the alpha generation's propensity to receive from that channel, right? And willingness to receive from that channel. And non-willingness to receive from a human mouth. And older people don't really understand that. So yeah, they're pressing like, less screen time, less screen time. And also this part, there's not been a really clean distinction in terms of curriculum planning to move to asynchronous, separating asynchronous cleanly from synchronous. So if you watch this younger population, it's even true of, I think, the millennials, they like synchronous when it's purposeful synchronous, right? Like they'll go to that thing, the game or the activity of whatever kind, or, you know, there's a reason to be there. But if there's not a defined and clear togetherness, it's just one person lecturing at you, that doesn't really make sense to them. So you have this need to get distinguished between what is asynchronous and what is synchronous, and maybe use your screen time for the asynchronous way more, right? Because didn't we do that? Don't we do that anyway with homework, right? If we're not going to use paper books, you can still use paper books for asynchronous, but then cause the togetherness to be project-based, a lab, a group discussion, really, make it so that it's a reason to be there, which is another thing that's going to drive, enrollment. Like, oh, there's purposefulness. It's not like I just go to the classroom, the teacher lectures at us for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then we're all just working independently, right? So there's no real strong togetherness, because you're trying to overlay personalization on top of a whole group motion, and it's just very awkward. It's not built for this. Does that make sense, Anne?
Oh, it totally makes sense. I just wish some of the people who are putting so much pressure on our school leaders who are trying to be progressive also understood some of those things.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to communicate, right? Because you're
It's
you're
very.
certainly right. You're certainly right if it's like wasted screen time. That's definitely true. Yeah, we need to get them off there. We need to get them interacting. But if we're not doing it as a purposeful sort of expositional experience, it's like, highly marketed, right? Like, come to this thing, it's going to be awesome. Then we're missing the boat because we're not going to communicate with them. They won't arrive mentally, right? You can watch them in a school setting where it's like somebody's up there, like, remember the Peanuts character
Oh,
and this,
absolutely. Wah, wah, wah.
it's like wah wah wah. That's what they're hearing. I mean, that's what we heard, right? And I think lecturing has sort of been disproven a long time ago as the mode to really reach people anyway.
Yeah, but
Um,
thanks for amplifying this, and hopefully other people will be able to articulate it to their communities. Unfortunately, we still see superintendents flying out the door more quickly in tenure in districts because of sometimes accurate, sometimes misinformation about what they're
yeah,
trying to accomplish.
yeah. Thank you for mentioning this because I think we need to do more editorializing on it. What is the difference with this population and why this is happening? Why there's a clash between, what they need and what the pushback is from the older populations, like less screen time. No, 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 no. Quality crafted asynchronous is valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the other levels. So where you see a little bit of manipulation of model is happening the most with time, right? People realize flex time needs to be put in there, and there needs to be, maybe more flexible courses. So then you get into resources, which is the next level down, which is where a lot of schools and districts try to manipulate what they have and what they're doing in order to be relevant. Let's use a social emotional program. Let's use this. Let's use that. Blah 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 blah. There's a lot of like, resource issues and how we're going to do that. And then the final one is method. And you'll notice that the majority of schools have been spending their time trying to innovate method. Let's do flip. Let's do blended. Let's do blended. Let's do the blah blah blah. I want to point out that those two bottom ones are below model and below form. And the only thing that really should be getting the attention of leadership right now is form first, and then model, logistics, resources, and method, because the form that we're in is 250 years old and it's not working. We're losing kids to charters, we're losing kids to anything. And I think, and I've stated this before in other sort of presentations, that if we're not going to alter form to fit this century, then it's going to all the market itself is going to alter around us, and you can see that very, very, very clearly in the data. And it's landing in homeschooling, which is sort of like the Wild West. Like, who knows what they're all doing out there, right? So people are also having calls for let's put some order in and let's like inspect what the homeschoolers are doing and that kind of thing. So that's going to be a trend as well, because there's going to need to be some accountability if we have such a huge population that's sort of left the building. All right, so If we talk about form level innovation, you guys probably remember the famous person who talked about form following function, an architect in the 1700s. Form and function in science refer to the direct relationship between the structure of the thing and the way it functions. And I want you to just step back and look at the average school and realize that every superintendent and every administrator is walking in the building every day and wondering what big emergency is going to happen today and what's going to be the problem. And they feel like they're sort of on a rickety ship that's about to fall apart at any time. And they're constantly patching. They're patching with new resources. They're patching with people. They're patching with, maybe we should try this method. They're always trying to look for things that are below the level of form without changing the form. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Form, this century's function is dominated by the internet. You can see that with the growth of Amazon, with Uber, with all the shipping and logistics that happen in the world. The form is therefore a mesh network. That is the form of communication patterns. It's the form that is used for transactions in almost every industry. So we're leaving the hierarchical, bureaucratic centralization. We've left it long ago in every other industry except for education. To what most businesses have now is what's called a flatarchy, which means decisions are made based on the role, and the role has all authority rather than a sort of bureaucratic hierarchical thing. So it's moving also to an adhocracy, away from bureaucracy. So ad hoc decisions are made. If you talk to anybody in corporate America today, they will lament the fact that there's constant ongoing meetings. This is because bureaucracies have flattened. They don't have the same structure. So it's not vertical pyramidal anymore. It is a mesh omnidirectional communication pattern. That is what is happening to education now as you watch the homeschooler movement, as you watch the charter movement, more private schools getting, as you watch people say we want to be more progressive. If you really inspect that, what's really happening is that the form is trying to go the direction of where the communications all are, which is the internet. And the internet is an unstructured omnidirectional communication machine. And so essentially, I'm going to go back to the top of the slide. This century's functions are dominated by the internet. Therefore, the form is a mesh network. So if you apply that to schools, you start to understand what I'm talking about. What would a mesh network look like if I was a school? How would that work? Okay, there's an anonymous attendee just asked, what are your thoughts on New York State's proposed regulations on virtual learning that would only allow teachers employed by the district to teach virtual courses? I think that's crazy. I have to go look at your link. But it's crazy because you can't get the teachers. And usually the way they're going to teach a virtual course is through a conference call link, which bombed big time during the pandemic. There needs to be a new definition of course, which is something that is asynchronous, and then the meeting, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more, and then more asynchronous, and then the meeting, and more asynchronous, and then the meeting, and it needs to be pace-based. So the whole thing where we're just going to lock down and cater to the union isn't going to work because the size of the homeschooling and off-grid market and charters is just off the charts. With a 51 to 60 something year-on-year growth rate, we're looking at inside of 5 years, a complete debacle. And when you add the money on top of it that's going into vouchers, it's just majestic. I mean, there's no way that they're going to be able to keep the structure and the unions happy without redirecting how teachers are used. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Anonymous. Okay, so let's talk about that schooling market trajectory. We have a few more minutes here, and then I want to have you guys just think about really, really smart questions to ask. Again, this is because of all the data that we're looking at. If you look at the manufacturing model, it's very linear. It's class to class to class. It's motion by group, which is a normalization of you by your age, which isn't working for a lot of people because they're fourth graders in sixth grade reading materials, but third grade math. And those kids are showing up in every classroom, and classrooms by teachers, they know this. They know some of the kids in the class are 2 or 3 grades behind. They know some of them are ahead, and they have to try to keep the group together like a shepherd. So they know some are just going to get, remedial materials, and they're not going to be able to spend enough time with them, and they're going to fail and get Fs. And then some of the other ones are going to be bored, and they're going to act out and cause discipline issues. The whole group thing is kind of ugly. So in the meantime, that structure has staffing shortage, student attrition, absentee, learning loss. It's mostly place-based, sometimes it's online. In fact, most online is still whole group oriented. There's low or no real personalization because of what I just said: age, by class, by course, still whole group. So if you try to personalize over the top of that, it's just sort of within this little tiny fraction of what could be true personalization, where if you are in third grade math, why aren't you in third grade math? And if you're in sixth grade while you're in the fifth grade, your sixth grade learning, level and language, why aren't you doing that? Or let's cut back your time that you're in language because you're so far ahead, and give you more time in math so you get caught up really quickly and you start to be on the normal for your age group. So that teacher gated distribution of mostly discrete digital resources, which are pieces, right? Paper or by voice instruction learning, is really under assault. So then you look at where it's going is the mesh network model. It's a distributed informal organization. It acts like retail. It acts like Amazon. So it's gig teaching from anywhere. So you can get your specialist teachers. I mean, the special education market's already doing this. Unstructured learning with both method and medium shift. That's deep. You should think about that one. It's hybrid or it's placeless. And it needs to be personalized, pace-based experience online, adjusted for time. And every school is then a hub offering teacher intersected learning with automated distribution of very sophisticated digital resources using advanced digital logistics. So what we're predicting is that individual schools become these localized hubs for teacher and other student intersection, but all learning is asynchronous until the synchronous moment happens, as a reason to be there and be affiliated with a particular place. But more importantly, and I think this is a really important one, a huge growth in the planning for individual personalized pace-based learning. So that school becomes the pathway planner professionals, kind of like when you want to go see your school counselor, and now there's like a whole rack of them in every school, and all they do is customize basically your IEP, and adjust your time on any one thing. If you can imagine that world, it's a mesh network model. All right, so I want to talk to you a little bit about this new schooling model, which Learning Council has been a really big part of. It's the hybrid logistics schooling model, and it uses as its center pin AI, particularly spatial temporal AI. So what that means is that it's an AI where you make a meeting, and I'll show you how this works, that would trigger the togetherness based on pace. So if 10 students complete something, then they're in the first group, and then the next 10, and the next 10, and the next 10. And then the whole group, I'm getting signals from my staff, moves from that manufacturing model to a homeroom model. So they could still be all on campus if you still require that. Your laws haven't changed. Might have 7, 8 homerooms. And then they're triggered out to classrooms as meeting spaces. In the meantime, the teachers are roaming and handling kids maybe who are far behind or way ahead, giving them extra work or another course, adjusting their whole time sequences. But they're able to do the true direct instruction and personalization that is really needed by kids, to catch them up or do something for them. But they could technically be on a course that is 2 grades behind all their peers, but they're with their peers in the homerooms all the time and getting paired up and working over on the interactive whiteboard together and doing things that are usual in a classroom. But now the teacher's removed from having to do the discipline part because they're the talent. They're the person who comes in during the classroom moment. The classroom moment's only 20 minutes long, but it's a discussion on a chapter about the characters in that chapter. It's let's do this worksheet together so we all know we get fractions or however that would work. But it's a different structure because AI is now handling time and space. All right, so the hybrid logistics project, just so you guys are aware of it, is the project that's all about that schooling innovation vision. It uses all the 4 types of AI in the vision. to trigger live teaching cohorts as they accrue to that designated point of course or study. Just like if you order an Uber, it puts you together with that person. Now imagine that happening for a group. So the meeting is made, but it hovers or floats until it accrues the right number, and then it automatically sets to all the calendars within the time parameters the teacher is teaching. So the courses intersect with live teaching dynamically in a rearranged schema of all the staffing, the spaces, the time, and all the technologies. So it's not a small undertaking, but this is the first vision that we've encountered and actually helped create that is a rearrangement of form at that level, not just the resources and methods. So it actually has to distinguish between what is asynchronous, homerooms or remote, and what is togetherness and or virtual. So this is where that screen time thing, Anne, comes into play. When you're together, yes, everybody put your phones down, right? Put your iPad away. When we're together, we're doing something together, right? It's a purposeful moment. And so it means that, you've got to use the interactive whiteboards. You got to use the drones, the AR, VR headsets. You have to do something that's going to be attractive as a moment of togetherness. And it also creates the anticipation because you want to get your work done so you can do that thing that's up next. And also that's an attraction to your school, right? Why would I homeschool my child when there's really great stuff they get to do when they're there? They get to play with the underwater drones or go out on the sidewalks and, launch a drone or whatever, or play with robots. Those things I can't afford as a homeschooler. So I want to do that. All right. So the way that would work if you look at the curriculum future and that caters to that alpha generation is a school would have to sort of look at, I got to create all my pacing units, which they do now, right? You create your pacing guides. You would create then every single course, which has every lesson step and all the resources. So this is the alien ground for teachers because schools sort of create the rough guidelines and timing, and then everything is at the teacher level. So it disaggregates and into the teacher level. Now, if you pull that back up, it's kind of like the days of textbooks. You go, okay, we're going to do all the lesson plans. And then your job is that enhanced togetherness. You're going to go look at the course and each step, and you're going to attach to that course at each step what the togetherness is. So that's your teaching against the layers of the lessons. So if you imagine that's kind of a lot to swallow, but if you look at the way the future is going to have to be in order to manage this particular century, the alpha generation, and what they're expecting and what's happening in every sort of outside industry, it's sort of an inevitability that this is going to be happening because it's already happening in the online world, it's already happening in the homeschooling world. Okay. So the way that actually works, the way calendaring, AI calendaring works is you have your course, maybe it's in an LMS, maybe it's in Google or Microsoft Class, but then you put a frame around it to say lesson 1 is this, and there's a link over here to it over in the learning management system, or maybe it's Edmentum, or it's IXL, or it's Dreambox, or it's Carnegie Learning's courses, or it's IQ Era's courses. But anyway, you sort of put those here and you put time to them because this is going to take 3 hours for you to get through this module, or 1 hour, 20 minutes. And then when you're done, you click finish, and then that enrolls you in the course. So the courses are created by the institution, or brought in from somewhere else. And then the teachers do the meeting moments, and they can add additional resources, they can add links, they can give further instruction for preparatory work before that moment of togetherness. And when they're done making it, they get a link that they can take out to put back in the learning management system. If the school wants their kids only to be over there and not in a calendar, they're over there. It still pops up on their calendar, sends them a message, hey, you got a meeting in 15 minutes or tomorrow at 10 a.m. So then there's flight boards in your homerooms, and there's flight boards in the hall. So if anybody's wandering the hall, the administrator that's walking the hall and the principal can say, hey, aren't you supposed to be in room 101B right now? Get over there. What are you doing over here? So anyway, so that's how that works. And then the way it works at the student level is they receive that item or on their tracking panel. And then when they're done with their work, they click finish, then they're enrolled. The meeting waits, the AI waits until everybody's enrolled that's supposed to be enrolled for the first set for that particular type of meeting. And then it triggers all calendars and the meeting happens. And then when the kids are done with that, they go back to their homeroom or their remote. And if the AI is already accruing, next cohort, then that they go forward with the next one. Okay, so what does the project do? I have like 5 seconds. These are the proponents of the project, the people that are involved in it. They get involved in like, what are you going to need? How are you going to do this exactly? Doing a readiness review of whether or not you even have what you need, that kind of thing. And there will be a live demonstration at ISTE this year of how that all works, just so everyone knows. Okay, so those were the main parts of, and we're going to be showing you all of the school and district recognition as we go through here. If you're a school district that is not speaking today, I have your certificate in here. So if you want to pipe up, I can make sure you can see it. But other than that, we're just going to be reading the certificates for the districts that are speaking today as they come on to speak. And I believe the next speaking session is starting right now. So if there's no questions, just, or if you want to type in a question, please do. I'm sorry it took so long. But I'm going to transfer it over now to Doug Coffin, our Director of Operations, and have him start this next dialogue with Stacy and Megan and Diane. Thank you guys for being here.